Alright, hello everybody, this is Intermediate O, and it's been a while, so this new anime season, the current anime season, fall 2021, there was actually a lot of shows that I was interested in, and I kind of wanted to do this video because of it, basically, just give my quick impressions on them, and because there were so many shows and so many shows I wanted to watch though, and because sometimes, the episode difference was like, between airings was like 2 weeks, so that, one show would be on episode 1 and another show would be on episode 3. I wanted to do like, just all episode 1s or maybe the first 3 episodes, and now we're literally halfway through the season. So for a lot of the shows here, we're going to start off with the shows that I dropped pretty much at episode 1, but by the end for the shows that I will be continuing, some of these shows I've watched almost 6 episodes of. So yeah, this is just going to be a fun video about my opinions on the shows from this season. And one of the reasons why this season is so interesting to me is that for some reason there is so much mecha this season. I believe there are 7 mecha shows total, which is a lot to have in one season when sometimes we can have no season. I mean, we can have no mecha show in one season. So yeah, so we're going to start off with the shows that I dropped. There's a couple of them, and then we're going to go on to the shows that I'm going to continue watching and maybe finish, probably finish. And as you can see from the thumbnail, we'll be discussing 26 shows, and even though that's a ton of shows, I did not watch all of them. So if you want to know which shows I watched specifically, you can go ahead and go down to the comments, and you can actually skip to the shows that you want to get my impressions of. So, not the comments actually, sorry, I mean in the video description. So if you go down to the video description, there will be timestamps for all of the series that I watched and those impressions in this video, if you just want to skip around. But yeah, we'll be starting with the shows that I dropped, starting now. So we're going to be starting off with the light novel shows. I ended up dropping a lot of the light novel shows that I did end up watching. So this is the first one, which is Banished from the Hero's Party. I decided to live a quiet life in the countryside. And so I ended up watching this one. I don't watch a ton of the light novel shows just because a lot of them usually end up being isekai, and I've just kind of oversaturated with those type of stories, and I haven't been interested in them for a while. And so this show, funnily enough, the only reason I even checked out the show is because I got it confused with a light novel series that I was actually kind of interested that came out a while ago called, I forgot it was localized by this title, was Sexiled. But then the full Japanese title, or like the translation of the Japanese title, is My Sexist Party Leader Kicked Me Out, so I teamed up with a mythical sorceress. And so yeah, so that series I was actually kind of interested in, and as you can see, like the, Banished from the Party theme was the same. For some reason I got that like wires crossed when I saw the title of this one, and this is totally not what that one was. But I watched the first episode, and this is a nice little show. The main character was pretty chill. It's literally a quiet life in the countryside. It seems like it's going to be a pretty chill show, but it's just not my cup of tea. And I just decided to not continue watching it. Even by the end of the first episode, there really is no overarching story yet. But the fact that it is a light novel series, I feel like there probably will be at least one overarching story for like, the first couple episodes. Like maybe the first 4 episodes, which would probably adapt like the first novel, but I didn't stick around long enough to figure out what that story would be. So yeah, it's just a chill dude who got banished from his party, and now he's living a countryside life. Not much more to say about this one. Next is the Faraway Paladin, which is another light novel adaptation. And this one I ended up liking a lot more. So the first episode is basically, the setup is that this little red-haired child is being taken care of for some reason by 3 kind of undead entities, where like one of them is like a mummy nun, and then I believe a ghost wizard, and then the other one is skeleton warrior. And so it's kind of a weird setup. And I liked it. So it is just kind of this kind of like, bonding between these 3 kind of weird parents and this adopted child. But halfway through the first episode, so the reason why I dropped the show, halfway through the first episode, there's this twist that, and it's not really a twist, but they reveal that the main character, this small child, is actually reincarnated from our world. It's basically an isekai show. So I was like, oh, why'd you gotta do that? And then also, based on the poster you can see right here, and then all the promotional material, it is very obvious that the show is not going to be about their family, but the show is going to be about the red-haired kid. He's probably going to grow up significantly fast, like maybe in the second episode, and then go off on a journey. And so that's why I basically dropped it, is they basically showed me a show that I would have much preferred watching, which is just these 3 odd undead parents taking care of this child. But instead it's like, oh no, it's actually is just the generic isekai show that it is going to become at some point, where it's just like this guy goes out on a journey. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's kind of boring. Like, yeah. It's not, okay, sorry, it's not that it's boring, It's just that the show that they presented itself as at the beginning was better. So I don't know why you'd present me a show I would rather watch and then change it to the more generic show. So that's why I dropped this one. Next is Irina, the Vampire Cosmonaut. And so the basic setup to this show is that it's taking place during, the space race period with the Soviet Union, during that time period. And because of that, a lot of the show is very aesthetically interesting. I like the aesthetics a lot in it. It's not a setting. It's not a period or location that you really get to see, tackled a bunch in anime. So that part is interesting. The main reason I dropped it, this is another light novel show, but it's not just because of that. It's mainly because the premise of the show, they explain it in a way that aggravated me because it doesn't really make any sense. So if they were just like, oh, it's a cool show taking place during the space race period, and there's a Russian vampire who wants to be an astronaut, like that'd be cool. But for some reason, the show decides to go the route where they're trying to justify why is it a vampire? Like, why is a vampire becoming an astronaut? And then so they come up with the excuse that, oh, they're forcing the vampire to become an astronaut because vampires are disposable. And they're basically, they're disposable. They're not really seen as human. Like, they're kind of second-class citizens in that way. So because of that, the government institution is okay with, putting vampires in this dangerous position to be the first astronauts. And the reason why that bugs me is because it doesn't make any sense, because there are plenty of ethnic groups, even in current day, that some governments would do that too. So it's like, if you wanted to have a story about governments viewing ethnic groups as disposable, you don't need to go with vampires. Like, there are very real world parallels that you can use. So it just seems dumb in your story to act like it's sensible that they're doing that when there are so many other groups that the government could be doing that with during that time. So that's why it bugged me. Is it's just like, oh, like, okay, like I would have been cool if it's just a vampire who wants to become an astronaut. And if they wanted to make there be a reason, like there had to be like some sort of physical reason why it's a vampire, like they could have come up with like they're the only ones who can become astronauts at that time because of safety stuff, and they're immortal and they're like more durable or something like that. But no, it's like a weird metaphor for something that they didn't need to make a metaphor for, because it could have just been basically you can substitute the vampire for any marginalized ethnic group at that time, and it would have made more sense. So that just kind of irked me, so I dropped it after the first episode. But it was interesting. If this ended up being one of those light novel shows that became like a cultural moment, like ReZero. I did not watch ReZero. I know ReZero is a huge deal though, so I want to go back and rewatch it someday. Then yeah, if that happened for this show, I would definitely rewatch it at some point in the future, or like just watch it straight through at some point in the future. But it doesn't seem like that's the case even now halfway through the season. It seems like it's just going to be a chill show that some people watched and liked. Continuing with the theme of vampires, I also watched The Vampire Dies in No Time, which is a new comedy show about a vampire who dies very quickly. So basically, like at the lightest touch, like he'll just burst into ashes and just like dissipate. But then of course he just like refigures himself right after that. It's basically a gag show. So the interesting thing about this show to me though, is that aesthetically, like even before it even came out, when I was seeing all the promotional stuff, it seemed so similar to Welcome to Demon School, Iruma-kun, which came out a while ago. I believe it's getting a season 3 as well. And then Iruma-kun really reminded me of the show Actually I Am, which came out a while before that. And then coincidentally, all three of these shows, Actually I Am, Iruma-kun, and then The Vampire Dies in No Time, all run in the same magazine in Japan, which is Weekly Shonen Champion. And so I don't know what's with that magazine, but for some reason they keep on having these series that are all so aesthetically similar, where it's like where they're kind of supernatural sitcoms, like with very neon and fluorescent color palettes. Like I don't know what's with that, but it's definitely like a trend with the series from that thing. So yeah, I checked out the first episode. It's another gag one. It's just not my type of humor, so that's why I did not continue watching it. Next is Waccha PriMagi, which I just watched the show just because it was like available to me. So I was like, yeah, I'll check it out. And then when I checked it out, I found out it's part of like this long running series that's been going on in Japan. I didn't even realize it was part of it. And I realized this because in the show, there was a shot of a store that is a real store. Like I've seen it in real life. Like it's actually next to, or one of the locations, I believe there's multiple locations, but one of the locations is right next to the Pokemon Center in Tokyo Station. And so the store is called the Prism Store. And so the Prism Store is a real store you can go to in real life, and it was in this first episode. But yeah, this is just a generic magical girl idol show from this long-running series that's also very confusing. So the series is apparently called the Pretty series, but it started off as a few anime series called Pretty Rhythm, and then it became Pretty Paradise, which then they would shorten to Prepara, and now this newest one is PriMagi. But then the pre and PriMagi, so sorry, the Waccha PriMagi stands for Watching Prism Magic. So this pre isn't even the pre for pretty, it's pre for prism. And so yeah, like the Prism store is also called the Prism store, and I believe there's the male spin-off, which is called King of Prism. So it's very confusing because it's like you have pretty, then you have prism, and then you have rhythm. So it's like all these three words, like they're so similar. Like the series is very confusing. This is the newest entry in just a generic magical girl series that will also have like arcade cabinets in Japan. But I checked it out. Not for me. I'm not into idol series. This is actually the only idol series that I watched this season, and it was because I mainly thought of it as a magical girl series, which I want to be more into magical girl shows. Just a lot of them don't end up being interesting to me. So yeah, this one was just a generic show. Not really that interesting, but I thought it'd be fun to mention the Prism store story there for you. So that's why I included it. Plus I watched it, so it's like, yeah, just include it. Next is Build Divide, number 000, Code Black, which is basically the new card game advertisement show. And so the only reason I watched this, like I knew I wasn't really going to like it. The only reason I watched it is because I do find it interesting how often, it's not that often, but every couple years, we'll get these card game based shows where it's like, I don't know who they're for, but I think I'm pretty sure they're mainly for adults. Like basically the main premise is that this is a card game show that is pretending like it's for kids when it's actually for adults. And when I say kids, I just mean minors. Like it's pretending like, oh, maybe if you're like in high school or middle school, you'll check this out. But I think the main people who are checking this out are adults. And I've watched some of the other ones. So like in recent years, we've had ZX Ignition, and then we also had Luck and Logic, and then we also had We Cross, and then all of these card game shows get multiple seasons. So I don't know who's consuming them. I've never seen people actually talk about these shows, but for some reason they pop up every now and again, and apparently there is some people out there, so I thought I'd check it out. And yeah, it's pretty generic. It's just a show where basically for some reason like the entire world's economy and like political systems and like just the world runs on a card game for some reason. So yeah, it doesn't really make a ton of sense. It's just advertising the card game. I think the thing that is most interesting to me is that it really reminded me of this American kind of papercraft puppet series I watched a while ago called Box Peak, which is from the Easy Allies YouTube channel, and it's actually from a creator on there called Kyle Bossman. And so he made it. It's a very short series. It's like 10 episodes. It's very funny. It's just a parody of these type of shows, even though it's specifically a parody of more shows like Duel Master, like legitimate kids shows. And it is very funny. It was very funny watching the first episode of this, seeing how many things that were parodied in Box Peak were done sincerely in this show. Like literally at some point in the show, there's a referee robot that just hangs around and referees the card games, and literally that's a plot point in Box Peak as well. So that was very funny to me. So yeah, check out the show. If you like this show, if you're watching the show, actually please tell me why. Or like please tell me that just mention maybe that you're watching in the comments and then tell me why. I'm very interested in the people who are watching this because I've never seen people ever talk about these card game shows. Like, can you watch the card game show if you have no interest in the card game? I don't really get it. Next is My Senpai is Annoying. Check this out. It's another comedy. I will say that, so this show, very basic premise. It's actually based off of a webcomic, basically, where it's just a very tiny, petite office worker lady and her very tall, built office superior, senpai, basically. And it's about their relationship in the workplace, and it's just a comedy, basically. It's just a lot of, slice of life, cutesy, gaggy stuff. And I went in knowing that it probably wasn't going to be gaggy enough for me. So I do like comedy sometimes, but my comedies have to be pretty gaggy. Like they have to be very over the top, I think. So like my type of comedy is more stuff like Azumanga Daioh from a long time ago, or the more recent like Nichijou, like stuff that is kind of heightened reality. And so this one is a little bit too slice of lifey to me, or iyashike if you want to say that, like the calming effect anime. So because of that, it wasn't really my cup of tea. I will say that the production values were really good, especially because it's based on a webcomic. I thought they would maybe cheap out a little bit, but like the art and the animation, I mean, it's kind of minimal animation because it's just a workplace setting, but it is very good. Like, it's a very good looking show. And I think part of the reason why that kind of surprised me actually was because the show is surprisingly similar to another show that came out a couple years ago called, I think it was called Oji-san and Marshmallow, and it was actually based off of, similarly, a web comic that was published on the same website. So I believe that this comic, My Senpai is Annoying, is also based on a web comic that runs on Pixiv, which is like a Japanese, it's basically the Japanese DeviantArt, and so was Oji-san and Marshmallow. And that show is similarly an office lady who has a crush on kind of a non-traditionally attractive man in the office, which is like, he's like an old man, basically. Like, he's like a dad. And in this one, is the main character kind of a dad? I mean, he's a bigger guy, you know what I mean? So it's like, both the shows kind of have the same premise. They're both in the same magazine, not magazine, they're both webcomics from the same website. So yeah, and that show did not have the best production values, despite that other show actually being a co-production with Crunchyroll. It was actually one of the very first Crunchyroll co-productions ever, I think. So yeah, this show wasn't really for me. Next is the Heike story, which this is one of the surprises of the season to me. So this was one of the shows that I dropped after the first episode. And in hindsight, I guess it wasn't that surprising. So this is actually it is an adaptation of Heike Monogatari, which is kind of one of the classic tales in Japanese. And it's one of those things where it's like everybody knows about it, but a lot of people don't actually read it. And then even the only thing I really know about Heike Monogatari is that the legend goes is that the reason why red and white are so prominent in Japan is because of the clans that this story is following, which is basically where the Heike is the Taira clan. Heike is basically just another way of saying Taira, and so it's about the conflict between the Taira clan and the Minamoto clan. And the Taira would use red, and the Minamoto clan would use white. So apparently, that the legend goes is that that's why red and white are so prominent in Japan and like even in the Japanese flag and stuff like that. But I actually looked this up, and apparently there's not a lot. There's nothing really concrete on it. So that really is genuinely just a legend. It seems so. But yeah, so this is just a new retelling for that story. And it didn't really interest me that much because I'm just generally not interested in that kind of setting. Like, historical Japanese settings, I'm not really that interested in. They're kind of boring to me. And so yeah, so I really wanted to like this show because it's from Science Saru, who are the people, it's like the studio that was funded by Masaki Yuasa, and he's actually doing an adaptation of kind of a spin-off to this retelling of Heike Monogatari, called Inuo. And so actually, fun story, Inuo was actually at the Tokyo International Film Festival, which was going on in Tokyo this week, and I really tried to get tickets to it, and they sold out. They sold out so fast that I literally had no chance. I was literally on the Tokyo International Film Festival website at 10 a.m. when tickets went on sale, and I was sit there refreshing the page, and they never went on sale. Like, it was literally, they were scooped up so fast that I never even see the button switch over for availability. Crazy. So I didn't get to see that, and that actually probably helped me not be interested in the show, because if I had gotten tickets, I may have actually checked out the show just for the sake of it being paired with Masaki Uesa's film. So yeah, this season we're getting the show. It's a retelling of Heike Monogatari, and a couple months from now we will get a movie that is a spin-off to this retelling, even though they have not confirmed if the movie takes place in the same universe as this anime, even though it is done by the same studio, Science Saru. So yeah. Oh, I guess another interesting thing about this adaptation, though, is that apparently it's made by a lot of the staff who kind of left Kyoto Animation in like an exodus. So the director is Naoko Yamada, and the two collaborators that joined her from Kyoto Animation were a scriptwriter named Reiko Yoshida and a music composer known as Kinsuke Ushio. So apparently these three previously worked at Kyoto Animation on A Silent Voice and Liz and the Bluebird, so those two movies. And apparently the scriptwriter specifically, Reiko Yoshida, she's collaborated with the director the longest, and so apparently some other things that they previously worked on together were K-On!, Tamako Market, and Tamako Love Story, the movie for that. So that is interesting to me that you kind of have these people leaving this acclaimed studio, Kyoto Animation, for this now other acclaimed studio, Science Saru. So yeah, so that is interesting to me. If this sounds even a little bit interesting to you, then I'd say go ahead, check it out. It may be your thing. The traditional Japanese setting is not really my thing. I'm not really into political period dramas like that. Next is Mieruko-chan. So this was one of the shows that I actually did not drop right away. So I actually ended up checking out 2 episodes of the show, and I liked it enough that I was actually planning on dropping it the first episode, and I checked out the second episode, and then it just, yeah, maybe I'll even check out the third episode and the rest of the series at some point if I feel like it. But the basic setup is that the main character sees ghosts, but she really tries to not let the ghosts know that she sees them, because then they will want to interact with her. And so the first 2 episodes that I saw, basically that is the entire plot. The entire plot is that this girl can see ghosts, and she doesn't want them to know she can see her. So we get to see her reactions when ghosts will show up in her face, scare her, but she's like trying so hard to keep it together and like not scream or anything because she doesn't want them annoying her with knowing that she can interact with them. So that's the show. That's the entire show as far as I saw. And it was interesting. It was interesting. There's a little bit too much like fan service. Like there's a lot of fan service shots, but you can say arguably like a lot of horror movies in America also have a problem with like, over sexualizing people in horror films for some reason. So yeah, so in a way that's kind of like ironically authentic to like be horror, but I would have preferred it if it wasn't so egregious. But yeah, it's actually not. It's not even that the show is like that funny. It's kind of funny because it is kind of terrifying. Like to imagine that it's like you can see these things and then you just have to pretend like you don't. So it does actually do a good job of building tension and then letting it go with like maybe a laugh at the end because she like gets away with it and then the ghost will leave her alone. And based on the opening sequence, you can kind of assume that the progression of the show was going to be like, she makes friends and then like maybe some of her friends can see them, or like there'll be other supernatural characters who can maybe see them. But as far as I watched, none of that happened, and I just didn't really want to stick around to just see the same joke over and over again until they got to that point. But yeah, it was an interesting show for what I watched. Alright, so this is the last show. This is the last show of the drop section. So this is Tesla Note. And Tesla Note, I actually ended up watching 3 episodes of this show. So the basic premise of Tesla Note is it is about a ninja girl who was trained by her grandfather for the day that things known as the Tesla crystals will come back and endanger the world. And so the premise is that Tesla, the great inventor, blah, 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 he had inventions that humanity could not use yet, and that they're too dangerous to be used yet, so he sealed them within crystals. But one day, somebody may come along and try to uncover those crystals, or they'll accidentally uncover these crystals that he's hidden, which have these inventions that basically have superpowers in them, and that it is their job to find and contain these crystals before they do the world harm. And so that's kind of the plot for the first 2 episodes. It's like a crystal awakens, and then so she's put into action, and they gotta go find it and keep it under control. And that's kind of the plot for like the main series as well. Okay, so I'll tell you why I was interested in the show, and why this show I was actually planning on finishing. Like I was pretty sure that I was going to watch this show to the very end, despite the fact that it's pretty generic, and it's also very bad looking. Like, so I'll have clips on the screen right now, so you've seen how bad it is, and you've probably actually seen people trash on the show. It's definitely the worst looking show of the season. Like, it is the ugliest show of the season. It does not look good. I don't know why they did this. It is obviously just like it is a cost cutting thing. So like the majority of the show is in CG, and it's in motion captured CG, and then there's really bad blending with the background characters, where it's like background characters will just they'll just be in 2D, even though all the main characters are in 3D, even when they're interacting with the background characters. It does not look good. This is basically X-Arm 2. Like, it looks as bad as X-Arm. In a lot of ways, it's as bad as X-Arm. But I was planning to finish this show because of 2 reasons. So the first reason was that this show is based off of a manga, and the manga is written by basically the main writer of Tiger and Bunny. So Tiger and Bunny is a show that came out a long time ago. It's getting a second season next year. It's actually taken them 11 years, I believe. It's been 11 years since like the first season came out. And I've always been interested in writers who transition to a different medium. So whether that's like an anime writer who all of a sudden is writing manga, or sometimes it actually happens with manga too, where it's like a manga writer will all of a sudden they'll convince a studio to like let them make an anime. So like recent examples is Planet With, which was from a manga guy, as well as Recreators, which is from a manga person as well who made Black Lagoon. I'm always interested in series where the creator has like made some sort of transition to a different medium. So that was one of the reasons I was interested. the other reason I was interested is because not only was this based off of the manga from the guy who basically wrote Tiger and Bunny anime, but the manga was basically it skipped a line. It skipped a line and it got put in Weekly Shonen Magazine, which is kind of one of the big 3 magazines in Japan. So basically the 3 big shonen magazines in Japan are Weekly Shonen Jump, which of course everybody knows, and the other one is Weekly Shonen Sunday, which has stuff like the Rumiko Takahashi series, like Inuyasha or Rine, or even this season it has Komi Can't Communicate, also runs in Weekly Shonen Sunday. And so this came from the other one, so the last of the big 3, which is Weekly Shonen Magazine. And it's very confusing because it's a magazine called Magazine. It's because in Japanese magazine is Zashi, and then the title of the magazine is called Magazine, like the English word magazine. Very confusing. And so yeah, so this runs in Weekly Shonen Magazine, which is another big magazine. It's responsible for stuff like Fairy Tail, Seven Deadly Sins, A Silent Voice. So yeah, a lot of big series. So it's very interesting that like this anime is very obviously was made, like this anime was planned at the beginning of that manga, like for sure. I'm pretty sure that like that's the reason why I got to skip a line. Basically, is like it had this connection with this guy in the anime industry, and I'm pretty sure they were like produced closely together, and it didn't even last. Like the promotion that it got from being in Weekly Shonen Magazine didn't even let it keep its spot there. So now it's in some other magazine. Like it got changed to like I believe a monthly magazine now. So yeah, that is interesting to me. It's interesting to me. Those are the 2 reasons, is that it was made by a guy from the anime industry, and then because of that, it got a spot in a really popular magazine that it wasn't even able to hold. Like it wasn't even able to hold on to. Okay, so after all that, you're probably wondering, it seems like I'm on board. It seems like I'm on board to finish this show, which I was. I did not imagine I was going to drop this show as hard as I did. So I made it to episode 3, and I was totally fine with the show. It's generic, dumb show, but I was just like enjoying it for what it was. And episode 3, literally, there are only 3 episodes in the show. Like I explained, the plot is that they have to find these crystals and like stop people from using them because they're dangerous. And then all of a sudden, episode 3 comes along and they completely abandon that. And episode 3 is basically a filler episode. And the plot of the episode is that the main girl finds out, this has nothing to do with the main plot of the show. It's just the main girl finds out that a girl at her school is being bullied. So the episode is a filler episode about them getting the bully to stop bullying this girl. And then this is how this resolves. This is why I dropped the show. This is resolved with them finding out that the bully is being groomed and sexually abused, and to get her to stop bullying the main character's classmate, they blackmail her to allow her to continue seeing her abuser. That is literally how they resolve the conflict. It is so effed up. Like, it is so effed up that it literally... So I dropped the show, and I don't even want to watch Tiger and Bunny Season 2 now. Like, I was looking forward to it. Like, I watched Tiger and Bunny Season 1 when it was airing all those years ago. And I've always wanted a second season. It's cool that's finally happening. Netflix just announced that they're going to get it, and they're going to be, like, simulcasting it. And I'm at the point now where it's like, I don't even want to see that show. And when I think back on it now, like, even in that show, there was a creepy, like, underage girl who was interested in an older guy in Tiger and Bunny as well. In that case, though, it was not reciprocated. In Tesla Note, in this case, it was reciprocated. So, yeah, total bummer. Dropped the show hard after episode 3. And, yeah, it kind of ruined Tiger and Bunny Season 2 as well. So, yeah, Tesla Note. Do not watch. Bad show, bad animation, bad story. But now, though, let's get into the shows that I did not drop. So all the shows from here on out are shows that I kept watching. Alright, so the first of the shows that I'm still currently watching, I have not dropped, and I'm intending to finish, which, as you can see from the rest of this video, is a lot of shows. I'm continuing a lot of shows this season, is Deep Insanity, The Lost Child. So the basic setup to the show is that the world has something called the Randolph syndrome, which is putting people into comas, and then probably related to this, there is a huge hole that seemingly opens up at the South Pole in Antarctica, and there's this huge chasm now, which they call the Asylum. And so these people, who they call the Sleepers, go into the Asylum to plunder it for natural resources and stuff like that. So this kind of sounds kind of gamey to you, and that is because Deep Insanity is actually a mobile game. And so this is a mobile game anime. So, and this is not the only one this season, and I will admit, mobile game anime are kind of my guilty pleasure. So that's, in addition to all the mecha that we got this season, we got 2 mobile game anime, and those are usually my jam. And so I think the reason why is because a lot of mobile game anime tend to be fantasy in some sense, and the games are usually so bare bones that the anime staff can kind of do whatever they want with them and go crazy with it. Like, I remember one of the ones I ended up liking a lot was Rage of Bahamut. Genesis, I think, is what the first anime was called, and that one I liked a lot. It was very fun. They put a lot of effort into it. Deep Insanity, I cannot say the same thing. So the anime is called Deep Insanity: The Lost Child, and I believe the mobile game itself is called Deep Insanity Asylum. And as I said before, Asylum is the name of the huge chasm that the main characters go down into teams to then kill monsters and plunder resources and blah blah blah. So at this point in the show, there hasn't been a lot of plot that has been built up yet. It pretty much is the same as it was in episode 1, where they're just kind of doing the bare bones of, introducing characters, building up the setting a little bit. There's no overarching plot yet, so that is kind of disappointing. One of the reasons why I am sticking with it, though, is that, so besides it being a mobile game anime, which is my jam for some reason, it is additionally, more specifically, a Square Enix mobile game anime. So because of that, like, historically, this will go down in history alongside things like Final Fantasy Advent Children, or even more recently, The World Ends With You, the animation. Like, this belongs in the same category of those. So, like, till the end of time, Wikipedia 1,000 years from now, when you want to Google, Square Enix video game anime, this will be one of the ones that comes up, even though I don't think it will really make that much of a cultural impact. But I think because of that, it is very interesting to me that they're putting all this effort into it. A lot of the times these shows bomb, not based on the source material, the fact that they're based on a mobile game, but based on the creatives behind it. And I don't think there's really there's not really anything interesting going on into the production. Like, the animation or the direction is not super unique or interesting at all, really. So yeah, I'll be checking out the show. I don't expect it to get better, but I do expect that I'm going to finish it. Alright, and moving on to the other mobile game anime of the season, we have Takt op.Destiny. And yes, it is pronounced opus, because I guess OP is just the shortening of opus, like as in an opus and music. So yeah, Takt op.Destiny. And so Takt is the name of our main character. He's the little conductor guy with a little wand, and then Destiny is the name of our main heroine, who looks like a Saber knockoff. And that is probably one of the things that is very confusing, not confusing, it is very jarring to me about the show, is this show to me looks like a new show from Ufotable, who are like the people who make, or UFO Table, who make the Fate series. Like, they do most of the Fate adaptations, and it's almost like they made their own knockoff of Fate. But this isn't. This is from Mappa. So this is a Mappa anime, and the main character, and then kind of the general vibe of the show may actually be aping off of the Fate series in general, but totally unrelated to both Fate and UFO Table. But yeah, so this is based off of a video game, which is just called Takt Opus, and then the show is called Takt op.Destiny, and Destiny is the name of the main heroine, blah blah blah. And the main premise of the show is that conductors use these kind of anthropomorphizations of classical music pieces. So in this case, Destiny is named after Beethoven's Destiny Symphony, and they use them to fight monsters that hate music. So in the show, which takes place in America actually, which is kind of interesting, and specifically it's like in the Southwest in the beginning, so it has a very interesting like Southwestern aesthetic, which is nice. So yeah, so the monsters will show up, and if they're like if they're in the area and they hear music, they will show up and they'll like just wreck everybody's crap because they don't like music. And so that's part of the drama of the show, is just like the main character is not just a figurative conductor, he's a literal, or I mean, I guess he's not a conductor, he's a musician who plays the piano, and he really likes playing the piano, and he hates that in their world, for the most part, you're not allowed to play music because music is dangerous. And so one of the things I did like about the show is that you can probably notice some similarities to the American film A Quiet Place, where aliens come down and they hate sounds, and in this case they are aliens actually, so the enemies and then also the technology for the music arts apparently also come down from meteors that land on the planet. But in this case, they are much more reasonable about the rules. So in A Quiet Place, which I don't really like because the rules don't make any sense, in this case it is like, it's only if they hear music. So it's like, you can play music if like you soundproof a room or something, but in general, people don't play music because it is still a dangerous thing to do. So I like that it is kind of the more reasonable version of A Quiet Place, and in addition to that, it's also got really good action. Like the action and animation in the show is really good. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out the show. It is probably my second most favorite show of the season. I'll almost definitely be finishing it. I do hope the plot picks up a little bit. It is kind of slow going. I am 5 episodes in, and there has not been a whole lot of development. The one warning I will give is that this is one of the shows this season where the first episode is kind of unneeded. The first episode is very much kind of filler in a way. Like it's just basically action for the sake of action so that you don't get, because they don't want you to drop the show. But the second episode of the show is so far the best episode, very good, and it sets up the entire show much better than the first episode. The first episode is basically, you don't need it. And if you watch this entire video, you'll find out that that is not the only anime that has that problem this season. So yeah, let's get on to the next show. Muv-Luv Alternative. And so this is another show, which if you had watched the previous part I just did, where Muv-Luv Alternative has a problem where the first episode of the show is not needed. It's basically just a fillery action episode that gets you to be invested for the sake of there being action, but it's not needed at all. Like you can skip the first episode apparently and not miss anything. And this is very funny because I've always been interested in the Muv-Luv series, and this is the third anime, I believe. And the problem that I've always had is that they've always been adapting the spin-offs. So I believe the first anime that came out was Muv-Luv Alternative Total Eclipse, which is a spin-off of this series. And then after that, they had another series called Schwarzesmarken. And so yeah, so there's been 2 other previous spin-off adaptation anime before this, and I know I've seen the beginnings of both of them, and I can't remember the second one, but I can remember Total Eclipse. And Total Eclipse had the exact same problem that this current adaptation had, where the first episode was just all action and just like gruesome action, but like no real plot. Like they didn't really introduce a plot, and because of that, and because it wasn't the original, it was like a weird adaptation of a spin-off, I kind of fell off the train with that one. But this is the one I've always been interested in, Muv-Luv, and I was really looking forward to this anime, and apparently the consensus is that this is a very bad adaptation. But as somebody who has not experienced Muv-Luv like in its entirety beforehand, it's been okay so far. So I am currently 4 episodes in. So I've seen the first 4 episodes, and so far I've liked the show, besides what I just said, where you can basically skip the first episode. It's basically in episode 0. And it is very aggravating, because from the second episode is where they actually set up the main plot of the show, which is the main character wakes up, seemingly traveled back in time. And so we kind of learn that the world, is being devastated by this attack of this alien threat called the Beta, and apparently we lost, but now the main character has kind of reset, and he's like woken up, and it's like a couple months before the world basically is destroyed by the monsters or whatever, the Beta. But then, very strangely, you find out that additionally, the twist is that not only did he wake up in the past, he also woke up in an alternate reality. And so apparently, this is where it's very confusing. So Muv-Luv Alternative is kind of like, I believe it's like the crowning jewel of the Muv-Luv universe, but it's also kind of the final thing of the storyline. So I believe Muv-Luv, this is like the second half of the story, and the first half is what we skipped. So I kind of wish that that's what they had gone over in the opening episode, in like episode 1. So from episode 2, we're basically introduced to the main character. He wakes up after the world has ended a couple months earlier, and now it's his mission to kind of prevent the world from ending. And then there is this other layer of before that, like he originally woke up in this world from another world where there was no threat at all. And so apparently that is kind of the first half of Muv-Luv, is just like this high school life where there is no threat, and then the main character comes to the alternative universe where there are these monsters, and then our story picks up after they've already lost, and he's trying to prevent the world from legitimately ending the next time. So it's very confusing. It's a very confusing setup. If anything, it has interested me in finally checking out the games, which I'm very impressed that they actually did get a release in the States. I believe they've even released it on like PS Vita. So if it ever comes out on Switch, or maybe I will pull out my Vita and get the games at some point. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in now, especially because everybody in the comments of each episode is always like, this is so bad, like, they adapt it this way. But so far, I'm enjoying it. So it's basically kind of this romp where this guy's doing the second time to kind of save the world. So yeah, that's nice. All right, and next up is probably a little lesser known show currently airing right now. Like, there is so much mecha, and so this is our second mecha show, which is Gundam Breaker Battlelogue, and it's actually in ONA, like it's a net animation, and it's streaming on Gundam's YouTube channels and stuff like that. And so this is a short series. Each episode is only around 8 minutes long, and there's only going to be 6 episodes, and I've watched the first 4 episodes of the 6. And the setup is a loose adaptation of the Gundam Breaker video games, and so this is kind of to promote those. And so far, it pretty much just has been mecha fan service, and it's kind of falls along the lines of like Gundam Build Fighters, Gundam Build Divers, just like, you know, it's trying to sell you the model kits. That's all it's really trying to doing. That's really all it's trying to do, and then also promote the video game. And so yeah, so the main characters, they make Gunpla. The Gunpla can come to life, and they can fight with them. The very generic base plot of the show is that some guy lost a competition, and he's super salty, and so he comes back with like this, I believe it's based off the Barbados from Iron-Blooded Orphans, but it's the Barbatoros, and it has like 4 legs, like a centaur. So that's kind of interesting. And he's salty. He's salty, and he's trying to wreck everybody's crap. He's trying to, you know, ruin their Gunpla, ruin their Gundams, and just be mean. And they're trying to stop him. And so yeah, the episodes go by really fast. It's just really dumb, fast action. And I'll finish it because it is so short. Other than that, I think the only notable thing is that in the show, there is a Gundam from a competition in the US. It's basically a USA Gundam. And this Gundam, you can currently buy in the USA. And they're like selling it exclusively like at Target. So like if you go to Target in the USA, you can find the USA Gundam that's in this show. And then I believe on the packaging for that Gundam, you can scan a QR code and then watch this anime. It's very weird cross promotion, and then the Gundam itself only appears, I believe, in like the show very briefly, where you see it at one of the competitions in the US. So that is interesting. Next, though, let's talk about AMAIM, Warrior at the Borderline. And so this is kind of the real Gundam show of the season, even though there is that Gundam OVA or ONA that's going on YouTube. So AMAIM is from Sunrise, but it's specifically from Sunrise's new studio called Sunrise Beyond, which I believe used to be Zebek. But yeah, so this is basically the real Gundam show of the season. And the basic setup is kind of lame. So it's kind of Code Geass, where it's like Japan has been like occupied by other nations now, but they take it a little bit too seriously, and I say that's kind of my overall problem with the show. But I am watching it, I will finish it, and I have currently finished the first 5 episodes. So the basic plot is that Japan has kind of been usurped by companies. So basically, companies have come in and taken over Japan, and they kind of occupy Japan now. And because of that, the natural Japanese citizens are kind of a lower class, and so there is a resistance that wants to fight against this. And so that's what our main character kind of gets thrown into in the first episode, where he finds this new mecha, and the mecha in the series are called AMAIM. And so his mecha is an AMAIM called Kinbu, which you can see like on the main poster. And so the main thing about the show is that it's made to sell the model kits. A little background of why I'm really interested in the show, though, is that this is the first original mecha show that I believe Sunrise has made in like almost 10 years. Let me Google the last original mecha show from them really quick. Okay, so this is the first original mecha series that they've launched, you know, because they just end up making a lot of Gundam. So it's the first one they've launched since Cross Ange in 2014. And I really like Cross Ange, and Cross Ange was kind of the cherry on top of a period where they did keep on trying to make new shows. So of course, probably the biggest mecha show, like original mecha show that they launched outside of Gundam, was Code Geass, which was in the late aughts, you know what I mean? And then in the beginning of the teens, they were trying other mecha shows as well. So the first one we got was Valvrave the Liberator in 2013. And then after that, we got Buddy Complex in the beginning of 2014. And then we finished off with Cross Ange at the end of 2014, going into 2015. So since then, so it's basically been 7 years. 7? It's basically been like 6 or 7 years since the end of Cross Ange. And yeah, we haven't had an original series from them since then. And another interesting to note about those other 3 original series that we got at the beginning of the teens was that Valvrave did launch with, I believe, just the main model kit for the main mecha, and then we did slowly get the model kits for the other 5 of the main mecha group as well. Buddy Complex, though. Buddy Complex was like absolutely, totally obliterated. It really was not a good show, but there was no mecha, like, merchandising for that show at all. I believe the most it got was in one of the hobby magazines in Japan. They did make mock-ups of potential, like, model kits or, like, mecha that they could make, like, figures that they could make of it someday. And then Cross Ange kind of came to the rescue, even though it was the last one they made. Maybe they were burned on both kind of the unpopularity of both Valvrave, which it did get some model kits and it had some popularity, and then Buddy Complex, which just completely busted. And then so Cross Ange came out and there was no figures. So there was like no figures, no model kits. But because the show was actually popular, because of its popularity, it got figures after the fact. So I think they were releasing figures like up to like the second year after the show had already finished. They were still like trying to get new figures out, and there was actually some figures that they announced that never ended up coming out. So yeah, so that kind of sucked for them. But Cross Ange, I believe, never got any model kits. It was just like posable figures that it got. So yeah, because of that, I'm interested in AMAIM because it's the first original, and also because they're going very hard on the show. This show has a lot of mecha behind the scenes, and so I believe they've already released 2 mecha from the franchise, which one of them is the Kimbu, of course, and the other one is kind of a version of the Kimbu, which is based off of kind of magazine novel. So this isn't that uncommon in Japan, where there will be a novel, like there'll be a serialized novel in like the monthly hobby magazines that have original designs, and then you can buy those designs from like the magazine. So there is one for kind of, we have this red AMAIM called the Kimbu, and I forgot the name of the blue one, but there's like a blue version that's kind of mirrors it, that's from the serialized like model novel, I guess is what you'd call it. So we have that one, and then they have a long list of upcoming mecha as well. So this series is very firmly, I'd say it's not a successor. It's not a successor to the kind of Valvrave Buddy Complex Cross Ange generation of original mecha. It's more so a successor to the Gundam Build series, including Gundam Build Fighters and Gundam Build Divers. And you may have actually already noticed that the character designs are actually done by the same person that did the Gundam Build Fighters and then Gundam Build Fighters Try. So it's definitely kind of more along the lines of that kind of audience, which I don't really know if I like how that's jiving with the tone of the show. So the character designs are a little bit more kiddie to me than I would want, because the story takes itself very seriously, and I don't really know why, because it's a commercial. The show is a commercial for the model kits, and the model kits, I didn't even mention it. Like I'm not really into Gunpla. I kind of want to get into model kits because I actually started watching Gundam recently, but I'm learning about the grades and blah blah blah, and I believe that the model kits for this series are specifically model kits that are meant for adults, basically. Like they're basically adult model kits, like they're not meant for kids. So I kind of don't know why the show is trying to seem so serious and then kiddie at the same time. And then as you can see, like the character designs, and then also the AI, like the AI are basically like these little chibi creatures that help them operate their mechas. So yeah, it's a very interesting show to me personally, even though I don't think a lot of people will have the same baggage that I do with it, so they may not be as interested in it as I am. But I will say the mecha designs, even though they're not like, I don't love the mecha designs, but I think they're fine. I think the mecha designs are fine, but the animation is really good. And then also the shading, like in a lot of the still shots when the mecha are just like, staying still, the shading on them are really good. Like it doesn't just look like a flat color. Like they add shading to it to make it look like a steel that it has like, I don't know how to explain it. It looks good. The mecha look good in the show. That's not going to be enough for me though. So like I will finish the show, but if it just end up being mecha porn for the entire thing and there's not really a solid story by the end of it, then I will be disappointed, and I won't look favorably on the show. And this is one of the few shows that has been confirmed to be multiple cores, so it will be running, I believe, for half a year. So we will be getting like 24, 26 episodes out of it. So next up is Rumble GARANNDOLL. Garandol? I'm not sure on the intonation, but yeah, Rumble GARANNDOLL. And the Japanese version of the name is actually, so that's Rumble GARANNDOLL is like the English name and the English subtitle, but the Japanese version of the name is basically Battery Girls. And then so the setup is kind of, it is a mecha show, and the mecha setup is that the main character pilots the mecha, and then to have the mecha function, it needs what is known as a battery girl. And so the battery girl co-pilot, I guess if you want to call them, kind of just sits in an entry plug in the back of the unit and powers the unit while the main character actually pilots it. That's the mecha setup. That's what the mecha is about in the show, and the mechas are kind of chibi, and they're kind of like super deformed and cutesy. I don't know if they may get figures if the show's popular, but I'm not really that into them. But those are the designs. If you like them, you like them. But the story. So the story of the show. So the plot of the show, though, is that this is so weird. This is a very weird show. I'm currently, sorry, I should remember to mention how many episodes I've watched. I've watched the first 4 episodes of Rumble GARANNDOLL. And so the plot of the story and setting of the show is that modern day Japan was invaded by an alternate history, alternate universe version of Japan that kind of stayed imperialistic. And so they kind of see themselves as the true country, I believe is how they phrase it. So the true country invades what they call the illusory country, which is kind of our modern version of Japan. So they show up and they kind of take over, and kind of the main aesthetic of this, though, so the show does not take itself seriously, but the main aesthetic of this is that these kind of imperialistic Japanese invaders from an alternate universe Japan take over the otaku-ness of modern day Japan. Basically, in this anime, otaku is like the truly repressed class. And so because of that, the show could end up being very bad. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying bad in like an offensive way. I'm just saying bad in like a really dumb way where it's like if it is just all about like otaku, like if you're an otaku, if you're a nerd, you're truly oppressed, because that's literally what the show's about. The show is about how otaku are oppressed. Like that's literally the basis of the show. But so far it hasn't meant a lot. So it's basically that's the setup, and so the main character himself is a host. Like he's an incredibly like handsome main character apparently, but secretly on the inside he's kind of an otaku, and like there's been some shows that he's watched before, and then that's kind of what connects him to the main battery girl. And we find out that the battery girl, specifically how they pilot the robots, like how they power the robots, is that the battery girls function off the power of otakudom, basically. So they function off the power of passion. So like the main character, the main heroine, I should say, the main heroine is powered by her otaku-ness. So the fact that the main character is a closeted otaku, that he's like hiding from the world, that no longer accepts otaku, like when they talk about stuff and she gets excited, she can then power the mecha. It has the potential to be very dumb, but maybe it'll be fun in a dumb way. So far, I'm not really enjoying the show, mainly because they don't go hard. I feel like my main problem with a lot of the shows this season is that they don't really go hard. Like they don't have as much fun with their premises as they can, and so yeah, it's just a little bit too slow for me. And I would say another problem is because of the world building. Like it is kind of interesting, that whole idea that it's like you have this really dumb like otaku faction that just wants to fight this very militant like imperialist imperialist otherworld Japan. But then it's very confusing because like as you can see like at the top of the poster, the otherworld Japan is like super otaku-y as well. Like they look like otaku. Like one of them is literally like a ninja chick for some reason, and it's like it's very there's a dissonance between what the show is saying it's about and then the how it's aesthetically portraying its story. And this also goes for our main characters as well, where our main character, you would think that the plot would be that the organization that the main character works for, everybody is an otaku, but because they want the main character and then the main heroine to have this connection about being otaku together, they specifically make it that nobody at the main organization that is fighting the true Japan, like the main faction, which is called Arahabaki, is literally a pun on Akihabara. So it's basically it's an anagram for Akihabara. So it's like literally the joke is that it's basically Akihabara is fighting like these anti-otaku imperialists, but like then you find out, it's very strange. You find out that like that the people that are in Arahabaki aren't even that really much of an otaku. Like they don't really know that much about anime, and I don't know why they did that. Like I think the only reason I could think is that they did that so that the main character secretly liking anime gives him a more significant connection to the main heroine, because otherwise it really doesn't make sense, because he's not like that much of an otaku. So like it doesn't really make sense why he would have such a significant like connection with this main character if she was literally part of an organization where everybody was an otaku. So very strange. The show is very strange so far. I definitely want to see where it goes. I hope it ends up having a little bit more thematic or even just aesthetic. I guess even aesthetic, like synergy by the end of it. Like, yeah, I hope it's more cohesive of a story by the end. Alright, next is Sakugan, which I have watched the first 5 episodes of. And so Sakugan, this is very funny. So Sakugan to me screams a show that, like, it looks like such an anime you would want to watch. Or specifically me, like, that I would want to watch. Like, if I saw this anime on the shelf, like, you know, either, like, as a VHS at Blockbuster, as a DVD at Best Buy, something like that. You know what I mean? Like, if this anime is on a shelf, I would want to watch this anime. But having seen the first 5 episodes, I would say it has not been the best so far. I do like it. I hope that it finishes strong. But I would say my main problem with it is, again, a lot of the anime this season just don't go hard. Like, they have very good aesthetic senses in the beginning, and they also have very good, like, production values, but they don't do a lot. Like, it's a lot of, like, meandering towards the middle, because now that we're halfway through the season, a lot of these shows have not gone anywhere, and I'm very afraid that all of them are going to do the 4 episode arc, where basically, you know, the first 2 episodes are set up, then like the middle 8 episodes are filler, and then like the last 2 episodes are the finale. I'm afraid a lot of the shows this season are kind of going to end up like that, and this one is the show that is kind of screaming that the most to me. And I think so part of that is so one of the surprising things is that Sakugan, which apparently Sakugan is short for Sax and Guns, which is a very strange name. But Sakugan is apparently not an original anime. It is actually based off of a novel that is unreleased. And so there was this competition in Japan where they kind of had 3 different premises, and then you could submit your own story for them. And so the one who won the premise for the science fiction / robot category was Sakugan. So there's originally 3 categories of kind of stories you could submit, and you could submit them as like, you know, novels or just like outlines or even manga or something like that. So you could basically submit your own original ideas for anime, and then they would choose one from each category. And so Sakugan, as I said, won the science fiction / robot category, and then there's another category for alternate / fantasy series, and then there's a last category for kids / game series. And so just like, you know, give you some background to the ones that won the other categories, which all 3 of them will be getting anime. I mean, obviously Sakugan already has an anime. So apparently the next one, so for the alternate world / fantasy winner, was a series called The Story of a Girl Who Couldn't Become a Wizard. And then later on we'll be getting an anime adaptation of the kid / game winner, which was called Mobius Dust. So all 3 of these were part of this Project Anima to basically, submit ideas for new anime projects. And so Sakugan was the winner, and apparently it won as an entry as a light novel. And not a light novel, I believe it was just a novel. And so it's based off a novel that is currently unpublished, and they currently don't seem to have any plans to ever publish it. But because of that, I would not be surprised if that is kind of the reason why it will be dragging in the middle, is because if it was just one book, they probably had to add filler. You know what I mean? Like, one book probably can't be stretched out to 12 episodes. Like, one book could probably, be 4 episodes, be 6 episodes, but to be a 12 episode series is pretty long. So I'm going to assume that they have to put filler in at some points in the series, even if they got, input from the original author. So yeah, I am enjoying it. The basic setup is that the main characters live in an underground world, and then there are adventurers who go out and like collect resources outside the little cities that they live in. And so the main character is called Mamimpu, and her father, Kagamba, go out and become adventurers together because the main girl just cannot not do that. So the first episode is kind of the setup of the father coming to terms with that because he's protective over her. She's only like 9 years old, and he doesn't want her to become an adventurer and go out there into the outside cave system because it's dangerous. And so yeah, that's basically the main setup of the show. I'd say the main things, besides the pacing where it hasn't really gone anywhere yet, which is kind of worrying, but besides that, aesthetically I like the show a lot, but your enjoyment of the show will also be heavily dependent on your tolerance for the relationship between Mamimpu, the daughter, and Gagamba, the father. And I would say I actually do like the father side of the relationship, But the problem is that Mamimpu, the little girl, she can get pretty annoying pretty fast because she's 9 years old, but she's also a know-it-all because literally, I don't know why they do this. So she's a 9-year-old who has graduated from college. And that's fine. This thing, it's fine if you want to have your story about a kid genius. And so like she's always she's like full of herself, which leads her to be annoying in a lot of instances. But it's very confusing because the show, it's like a have your cake and eat it too situation where a lot of the show wants to be about the father and the daughter relationship, but then they also want the daughter to be like a super genius. But then there's some sort of dissonance there. You know what I mean? Where it's like 1 second you want us to believe that she is completely a genius and can do all these things, and then turn around and then have us, treat her like she's a little girl who can't do anything. So that dissonance is kind of a little bit aggravating. Like I would have maybe been fun. Like I feel like they could have just done the same show and not have her be a super genius. Like she could just be a rambunctious kid, or they could have had the show and not have, like, just not have to deal with the fact that she's like 9. Like they could have just aged her up, but they kind of try to have their cake and eat it too. And I don't think it's working out so far. But yeah, I do like the show. I will be finishing the show, and I hope the show cohesively wraps together a little bit better. And the mecha design in the show, I actually did not realize it was a mecha show at the beginning. Because they take a little bit to like unveil the mecha, but it is nice. It's already getting a figure, which is also pretty, a figure and a model. There will be a figure version, an opposable figure version, and a model kit version that you can make yourself. But it is interesting that it's getting merchandise so quickly. So I guess they are kind of banking on the show a little bit. But yeah, on to the next show. Alright, so next up is Ancient Girls Frame, which is also sometimes stylized as Ancient G's Frame, but then the G just stands for girls. And so this is one of the shows where I guess it should be here because it's part of the season, but this is technically not an anime to some people. I would say it's an anime to me though. So, if you don't know, this is actually a Chinese animated series. But I think the caveat here is that it is also heavily produced in Japan. Like pretty much all the main staff are Japanese. So to me, it's more along the lines of something like The Legend of Korra or like Avatar, where Avatar it's entirely produced, unproduced. I see this thing. I don't know how strict these terms are, but so like in the case of Avatar: The Last Airbender, it's an American show that was animated Korea. So it's Korean animation and also American animation at the same time. So in the case of Ancient Girls Frame, it's a show that is animated in China, but it is planned. Like all the planning and coordination seems to be done on the Japanese side, and the animation is just done in China, but also the financing is also done in China. So I would say it's a co-production. So it is a Japanese-Chinese show. So yeah, that's kind of the background on that. Tell me in the comments if you consider it an anime or not. I guess I would, because it is produced with a lot of Japanese staff. Other than that though, Ancient Girls Frame is a show about girls piloting mechas. And that is pretty much it. It sucks because it is so funny because there are so many mecha shows this season. And like, that thing where it's like, when there's so many shows, like, it's like when there's a bad one, like when there's a really bad one, or in this case, a really mediocre one. It's just, this show is the most bland, most mediocre, like Fisher Price show ever. Like there's no hard edges. It is just rounded off. Like they sanded off every corner so that nobody can get hurt. Like it is the most generic show ever. And so you would think with all these mecha shows this season that I could just drop the show, but no, I'm watching it because for some reason in my brain I'm like, well, what's one more mecha show? Like, what? I'm only gonna watch 6 of the mecha show this season. It's like, no, I'm gonna watch all 7 of them. If I'm already watching all the other 6, I might as well watch this one too. So that's why I'm watching it. But yeah, this show is pretty unremarkable. It is so the basic plot is that the main character, her sister used to be a mecha pilot, and or like maybe not a mecha pilot, or she was just in the army, and then she died, and she wants to now join the army as well, and to also pilot mecha. It's very confusing about how much of the army revolves around the mecha, because apparently there's only a limited amount of pilots, but there's a lot of military people, so that's kind of confusing. But basically, her sister died a while ago. She wants to join the army to fight off these alien invaders in her sister's place now, and she does. So that's basically the plot. The plot is she wants to join the army, and she does, and the reason why she gets to join is because she ends up awakening a very powerful mecha that had not been awakened yet, and so now she's with the task force, and they're fighting, and that's pretty much it. It is very unremarkable. I think one of the only markable. That's confusing because it's funny how the opposite of irremarkable. No, wait, what was it? It's funny how if you say something's not that remarkable, but if you say something's remarkable, it sounds too extreme. Like, is there just like a neutral term, like markable? Interesting. Like, one of the interesting parts of the show is that I guess one of the pilots is, because it is a Chinese show, she is Muslim or Islamic in some sense. Like, she does have like a headscarf and everything. So that is kind of interesting to have that representation in the show. Other than that, though, like I don't think there's anything unique that the show does. I guess the mecha are kind of interesting. I don't like the character designs. That's one of the things I will say. I do not like the character designs of the female characters. They all have same face syndrome to me. Like, they look so doughy. Like, the line work too is like so thin. I don't like the character designs on the characters. The mecha designs are pretty cool, and they're all done in CG in the show, of course. But yeah, I hope we get to see more of them as the show goes on. I don't really have much else to say about the show. If you're watching it too, though, tell me in the comments what you're thinking about it, because I really don't know about the show, but I will probably finish it. Oh, and I totally forgot to mention how many episodes, which is 4. I've watched the first 4 episodes of it that are out now. Alright, on to the next show. Next we have Megaton Musashi, which I don't think is going to get a lot of talk in the foreign fan base, and that's because I don't believe it's streaming anywhere internationally, even though it is available on YouTube. It's raw, like there's no subtitles because it's on the Japanese YouTube channel. But so basically, this is the new kind of multimedia mix project from Level 5, which is a video game company that you probably know for things like Professor Layton, Inazuma 11, Little Battlers Experience, Ni no Kuni. They've been around for a while, and this thing, I've always been a fan of them. I've always been a fan of Level 5. I own a lot of their games, but I think the only one I've ever beaten is the very first Professor Layton game. I think is the only one I've ever beaten. I've always been interested in trying to follow one of their shows, and I actually did. Like, when I came to Japan, they did actually launch a new franchise called Snack World, and I actually watched all of Snack World, like, as it was airing, and I bought the Switch game, and I played a little bit of it, but I did not, like, beat the Switch game at all, which apparently, and then I was very surprised to find out that they, like, released the Switch game internationally, like, that was also surprising. So this is the first show they've released since then, and, like, since, like, Yokai Watch blew up, because, like, it went Yokai Watch, then the next thing they released, their next franchise was Snack World, and then Megaton Musashi is their new one, and it is going to be launching with a Switch game and a PS4 game, and this anime. And another little background here is that they've been promoting this anime for franchise. I should say franchise because that's what they always do. They launch it as a multimedia mix franchise. So this franchise they have been promoting, I think, since I came to Japan. Like, I want to say 2016 and maybe 2017. But I think at the very first Tokyo Game Show I went to, they had like a really big setup with this mecha that you could go take pictures with. And then, like, every year at, like, when they would have conventions in Tokyo, they would always be promoting this game. They'd always be promoting it, and they would never reveal anything about, like, is this actually coming out? Like, is this actually going to be a thing? Like, is there going to be a show? Is there even going to be a game? Like, they would literally just show up, and they had, like, a little pilot animation, which I believe is still on YouTube, and you can, like, find and watch it. It's probably, like, 20 minutes or something. And then you could go take pictures with the robot, and they would have, like, mock-up toys of what they could make to, like, sell in stores, but they never made it official until I believe, like, the past year, where it's like, okay, yeah, we're going to make an anime and a video game. But it feels like a long time coming. It feels like a long time coming, and I guess to finish my long diatribe about, like, the background of it, the actual premise of the show is pretty crazy, and kind of the most hard of the shows of the season, which is so funny, because this is a kid show. By the way, which I like that this is a kid show, because that's what Mecha was kind of originated as. Like, Mecha is basically, it was meant for kids. Like, it's meant to sell toys. Like, that's why they're robots, because you want to buy the toy robots. So yeah, it's nice to have kind of a show that is a legitimate mech show, not like all these other fake mech shows that are all for adults and things. But yeah, so the main premise of the show goes pretty hard. It is basically Matrix. It's the Matrix, but it's that aliens came and they conquered and they kind of wiped out Earth, but parts of humanity have survived in bunkers. And what they decided to do in these bunkers to kind of preserve peace is that they wipe out everybody's memory of the end of the world, so they just live a normal life. So like in the first episode, the main character thinks that it's just kind of like, average day, and like I believe it's Tokyo still. So it's like average day, like in Japan, just living my life, doing my thing, and then you find out that you're actually living in a bubble society after the world has been taken over. And so they do this so that people can just live calmly until they can maybe win the war. But sometimes these characters, and specifically our main characters, they will be chosen to pilot to help fight the resistance, to fight the aliens that have taken over the planet. So that's basically the plot of the show, is that pilots are chosen from the bubble to kind of, get the red pill. So they wake up and they realize that the world is being taken over, and then they help pilot these robots to then fight these aliens that are terraforming the planet, which they're terraforming the planet in like this crazy way where they hollowed out the earth, and like they're terraforming the core of the planet itself. Like not just the planet, but like specifically they're terraforming the core of the planet in some way. Very interesting. This show goes pretty hard in its big setup. And so far, other than that, it is kind of slow because it's a kid's show. This will probably be running for a full year. They have not confirmed. It may be like a 39 episode show, but it's probably going to be a full year show. And other than that, it seems like the main setup for now is that it's going to be characters are waking up. So it seems like a lot of it is going to be the main character and his schoolmates will be slowly chosen to come join the war and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, other than that, we're not too far in the show because percentage-wise, this is just the beginning. But I am going to stay on board with it, especially because it's streaming on YouTube and I can watch it at 2x speed. And I love watching stuff at 2x speed. Alright, and that was the last mecha show of the season. So yeah, I will be watching all of the mecha. Continuing with the kids shows though, I am also watching Digimon Ghost Game. So I am a huge Digimon fan. I totally fell off. I totally fell off of Digimon 2020 though, because of the pandemic. Like I was watching it week to week when it first aired, and then I believe it took like 2, maybe 3. It took off a couple months. It took off a couple months when the pandemic first started, and then I never came back to it. I do want to finish it. I do want to go back at some point and watch it. So this new series, Digimon Ghost Game, the basic premise, I guess I would say, is it's Digimon plus yokai, like plus Gegege no Kitaro, and that's it. It's basically a spooky version of Digimon, and so far I believe it is working pretty well. And I'm interested in why they chose this concept. I feel like I know why, and it's because so basically, Digimon 2020 aired last year, but the show that Digimon 2020 replaced was Kitaro 2019, I guess. Yeah, because that would be the year. So Gegege no Kitaro is like a famous like yokai series in Japan, and so Toei Animation, they did a new series of it in 2019, and it's just like a spooky. It probably started in 2018 though, but yeah. So in 2019 it probably finished, or maybe the beginning of 2020 it finished. But anyway, sorry. So anyways, they made a new series of Gegege no Kitaro, which is a famous yokai series, very spooky, uki spooky. Then they did Digimon 2020. And then so they were coming up with like, well, what's the next show we should do for that time slot? And I guess Digimon is popular enough that they chose to do another Digimon thing, and they're like, why not just add ghosts? Like, why don't we just do spooky Digimon? And so far, it is doing pretty good. I've liked it. I'd say the thing I like about it so far the most though is actually all the Digimon. So they're keeping the cast small. Like as you can see, there's only 3 main characters, and the Digimon themselves are pretty differentiated. So I would say probably the main problem with the Digimon, like the Digimon characters in Digimon, is that a lot of them just end up being the same character, which is just dumb and cute. In this new show specifically, so the main one, the little dinosaur you see, is called Gamamon, and he is dumb and he is cute, and that is his main thing. And he even tells the main character that he is his little brother, and that is kind of the thing about Digimon, is that Digimon is kind of, they act as like a little brother that you have to take care of, or you could even say it's almost like a child, like it's like a child raising a child, and a lot of them function on that dumb but cute gimmick. In this case though, all 3 Digimon are pretty different. So if you see the fluffy guy in the back, he's more stoic, and he's almost like a father type figure so far. Like he's much more put together. He's different. And then in the background, you can see there's a female Digimon that actually has a male partner, and her name is Jellymon, and she's probably the best of the group so far. And basically, she is a hacker gremlin. She's sassy. She's a sassy little gremlin hacker. Like, she probably subsists on, like, Doritos and Mountain Dew. Well, they don't really have No, they have Doritos. They have Doritos in Japan. They don't have Mountain Dew, so she probably drinks Lifeguard. Yeah, so she totally drinks Lifeguard and she eats like Doritos. That's totally what she would do. So yeah, so all of them are pretty unique Digimon personalities. So I do like that. And yeah, I'll be trying to watch this one every week and see where it goes. Oh, and I forgot to mention the episodes again, sorry. I watched the first 5 episodes. Alright, and so the last show that I am continuing to watch this season to round out our kids' shows is Muteking, the Dancing Hero. And so this show I was actually really looking forward to. So this is another one of what I like to call the Renaissance Tatsunoko production anime. And they're not really Renaissance, it's more like just a reboot series. And so Tatsunoko is, of course, they're known for like famous series like Battle of the Planets or Gatchaman. And then a couple years ago, they did a reboot of it called Gatchaman Crowds. And I really like that series. So it's like, you could say this period of their remaking their old shows maybe started with something like Kashurn, which they did a while ago. But the first one that I checked out was Gatchaman Crowds, which I really liked. And then they did Yatterman Night, which I also really liked. And so both those shows were very different from their original properties. And then they more recently did Infinity Force, which I did not watch. And then probably most relevantly to Muteking, they did a remake of Time Boken, which they remade it and they kept it as a kid series. And so they're doing the exact same thing here too, where they're remaking Muteking, which is an old Tatsunoko production show, and they're keeping it as a kid series. They're not like remaking it for like a more mature audience. And so I didn't watch Time Boken, but it was seemingly pretty successful. It got like a second season, and like I even remember seeing toys for it in Tokyo like a couple years ago. So it seemed pretty successful. And so I think they're hoping to replicate that with Muteking. But so far, I'm watching Muteking. Did I say how many episodes I've been watching? I've been watching the first 6. So I've watched the first 6 episodes of Muteking, and it has been pretty middle of the road. And I really wonder how many episodes it's supposed to be. Like, I feel like since it is a kids show, they're probably aiming for at least half a year, for like 24 or 26, and then maybe potentially it could be, 39 or 52. But I don't know how long the show is so far, but we're halfway through like one core of the show. We're like 6 episodes in, and nothing has really happened so far. Like the first episode is pretty much the same as the second episode, which is pretty much the same as the third episode, and so on. So the basic premise is that the main character moves to Neo San Francisco. So it basically takes place in San Francisco. They have a lot of landmarks. That actually is really nice about the show. And so he moves to Neo San Francisco, and he ends up being turned into the dancing hero, Muteking, who's the guy who's like in the Super Sentai outfit that you can see. So yeah, so not only do we have mecha this season, we also got some Sentai in there as well. And this is also not the last Sentai show of the season. So yeah, so he basically becomes this hero called Muteking. This show is very punny, but basically there's an evil organization that he ends up fighting who ends up controlling people with music. And so he fights them by dancing with his own music. The story is really strange and it's not really that coherent. It is a kids show. It is very much a kids show. I will say the thing I like the most though is the sequence when he does transform is very fun. The music, I really like the song. I really like the song a lot. It sounds super like funky and like kind of retro. And then I found out that that's because it is. It is literally the song from the old show, and I like the song a lot. Like I checked to see if it was on iTunes in Japan, and it's not. I mean, it probably is on iTunes. It's on Apple Music, like the subscription service. So that's annoying. I like the song a lot. And so basically, the organization does something in Neo San Francisco where they're like turning people into goo, which is black ink. They're turning people into black ink, and then Muteking will show up and he will save the day and he will beat up what seemingly is like this weird octopus entity, because that's kind of the pun, is that they're turning people into ink because octopi shoot ink or whatever. And so Muteking will show up and he will then beat the octopus entity into submission, and then everybody will stop turning into ink and the day is saved. This is the problem with the show, though, is not only is the show, like, the story is not really that coherent, they don't explain it at all, and there's no choreography. Like, so I will show you a clip right now of a sequence where basically Muteking shows up, and he is fighting, he's fighting, quote, air quotes, fighting the octopus entity that is inking people and turning them into ink to harvest or whatever, and then it just disappears. Like, literally, he shows up, he dances, and it disappears. Like, that is the choreography. Like, there is no punching, there is no kicking. It's just, for some reason, Muteking showing up and dancing makes the octopus entities, like, dissipate. It's so strange, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so I like the music. The art is okay. I like that it's different. Like, that's the thing, is because it is so different, like Gatchaman Crowds and Yatterman Night, I kind of was hoping it was a little bit more mature, but this is definitely the most kiddie a show could be. But interesting thing happened. When I was Googling stuff about like the song and everything, I ended up finding out they had the first 4 episodes of the original Muteking on YouTube from Tatsunoko, like totally streaming for free. And I watched the first 4 episodes, and it blew me away. The old series is so much better. It is so much better than this reboot, and it is so much more coherent and crazy and wacky. And I'm so upset that they're not like streaming all of it. Like, I don't even know where I could watch the rest of it. Like, it may be on like some streaming service in Japan. But the old series was so much more fun, so much more coherent. It blew me away. It really blew me away. And everything just made a lot more sense. I don't know what is up with this new series, but the new series is definitely a downgrade. It is a downgrade to the original series, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know how they saw the original series and they ended up making it more, like, they ended up making it more less, if that makes sense. Like, it goes way less hard, even though it looks crazy. Like, if you see all this stuff that I've been showing you, like, it looks crazy. Like, this show looks crazy, and the old show is way more crazier and makes way more sense somehow. Very, very strange. And a lot of like, as you can see, there's this octopus theming in the new show, which they have not explained at all. In the original show, they explain all the octopus theming, like, in the first episode. Like, straight up, there are aliens from outer space who are octopi, who are trying to take over the world. And not only that, the original show was also a mecha show. They had mecha, like, in every episode. Like, it was crazy. I wish this was like a mecha show, because then we'd have another mecha show this season. And the best thing I learned about the original show, the best thing I found in the original show is there was this one clip, I will show you this clip now, of the most unhinged police officer I've ever seen in anime, and it made me crack up. Wasn't that crazy? That was crazy. And then, so you also have to imagine, I watched my videos at 2 times speed. So what you just saw, I saw at 2 times speed, and it was hilarious. It was so funny. Alright, so that's it from Muteking. I will definitely be finishing it. I will probably only drop it. I will probably only drop it if it does end up being like a year-long show and it stays this quality. Yeah, because like, I don't think I could take 52 episodes of this, but if this is a 24-episode show, I'll probably finish it no matter what. Moving on to the other Sentai show of the season is Shikizakura. So this is a new show, told the original anime, and this was actually done as a collaboration with Nagoya City in Japan, which is in Aichi Prefecture. And so this is kind of almost like a PR anime, I think, in some ways. And I've heard about it for like years, and I remember seeing like a promotional picture a long time ago of like the main character designs, and I've been interested in it like since then. But yeah, it's taken them a long time to get it out, and a lot of it has been community based, seemingly. Like, I believe most of the voice actors have like auditioned, and they were like specifically looking for people, like new voice actors from like Nagoya, like from the area and everything like that. So it's a very interesting series in that aspect. It's just too bad that it does not carry over to the story so much. So I like the designs. This thing is, I like the designs. The animation, as you can see like from some of the clips, is CG. It is basically, it's the second CG show of the season with Tesla Note, but it looks way better than Tesla Note. It looks way better than Tesla Note, but it still does not look as good as it would if it was just like, hand animated. So that is kind of disappointing. Oh, and I forgot to mention the episodes. I have watched the first 5 episodes of the show so far. And so the basic premise of the show is that the main character ends up getting caught in between what seems to be a battle with demons, or Oni in Japanese, and he ends up getting taken over by an Oni himself, but suspiciously the Oni that takes him over looks like a Super Sentai outfit that the good guys of the story are also using. And so this has not really been explained so far. I still don't really get it. Like, this thing is, a lot of the shows this season don't really explain things as much as they should, I feel like. Like, I have been watching a lot of shows, so hopefully it's not just like something I missed. But yeah, so basically, he gets taken over by a Sentai-looking demon. Basically the Red Ranger. He gets taken over by the Red Ranger demon, or Oni. And he ends up joining a group after he gets it under control, who just have normal Sentai outfits. So, as you can see, like, there's the yellow girl, and then the purple girl, and then the green guy. And they just have normal, like, robotic Sentai outfits. And then he has his own Sentai outfit that happens to be combined with an Oni for some reason. I don't get it, you guys. The show has not really been that good. So that's the setup. He gets his own Oni outfit, and since then it has been very Power Rangers-y in the sense that every episode is just kind of like, you get a new enemy shows up, and you get a little story with like one of the characters. Like one of the characters gets to shine a little bit, and then you move on to the next enemy the next week. It's been very monster of the week so far. I don't even want to say monster though, because it's not really, the monster designs don't change a lot. It's more so the spotlight of the character who gets some background that week changes. So in that way, that is kind of disappointing. It's kind of disappointing that they don't vary up the enemy designs, and that probably is because it is a CG show, so they don't want to be reusing, they want to be reusing the same design over and over again. They don't want to be having a monster of the week, because if you have a monster of the week, you have to redesign that monster every single week, and they don't want to go through that. So it's kind of just the same monsters every week, but a new main character, or like a new spotlight character, and then so that's kind of been the pattern so far. So I don't really know where the series is going yet. I do think there's been some leaning that things are going to pick up, so it is going somewhere. I believe it is only going to be like a 12-episode show. So yeah, I hope it does go somewhere. I'm looking forward to it. I'm rooting for it. It has an interesting backstory. The animation, I would have preferred it if it was just 2D, but it looks good for being 3D. Like, it does work well with the 3D-ness. I will say though, it is still super jarring whenever they have 2D characters mixed in with 3D characters, which this show does sometimes, and that will always look lazy. Like, it'll always look lazy and jarring when that happens. So I do wish they had not done that. And I guess I'll leave you off with the show is that, so not only did they try to get like new amateur voice actors for the main characters, but they also had auditions like in America, like Anime Expo. And so there is this cameo in the first episode of like these people who won these English speaking auditions, and it threw me for a loop because I was like, whoa, that is like the best that is the best English I've heard in an anime in a long time. And I'm like, oh, it's because they're literally from America. Like, they literally are English speakers. Like, it's not Japanese people faking speaking English. So that's why. So here's that little clip.
Hey, Mia! What's this model?
Hi! This is the model of Obara after the incident that happened 8 years ago.
Wow. That was pretty bad, wasn't it? Thanks, Mia!
Anytime! Let me know if you need me again. Hanjo! Hanjo!
Hanjo, Mia!
Alright, let's get on to the next show. Alright, so next is Lupin the Third, Part 6. And so this is one of the shows. This is a series I've never really been that interested in, Lupin. So up until this point, I've only ever seen The Castle of Cagliostro, the Miyazaki movie, as well as The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, which I was not a huge fan of. I watched the whole thing week to week, actually, and I didn't like it that much. I liked that it existed. Like, it had a very interesting aesthetic. And I also like that it gave work to Kazuo Koike, because that was like after Redline had pretty much been a confirmed flop. And so it gave him work on like character designs, I believe. And then after that, he also was able to then kind of take the spiritual successor to The Woman Called Fujiko Mine, which is the trilogy of films that he then directed. So I like that. I like that that was kind of, it gave Kazuo Koike another outlet to like, be a little bit more creative and not just like disappear from the industry. So that was good. I have not really been interested in any of the shows after that. Such as Lupin III Part 4, or Part 5, or Part 6. The reason why Part 6 got me is because I've been watching so many shows this season, and the main thing was that it did have this new setup where it seemed a little bit less episodic and more cohesive, where specifically they introduced the character of Sherlock Holmes, and so they advertised it as this is going to be the story of Lupin versus Sherlock, like a season of that. And so my main problem with Lupin in general is that I kind of don't like Lupin and the gang. Like, a lot of them they're just unlikable. Like, I don't really like them. I'm not really into thief stories, like, because they're not Robin Hood-y, you know what I mean? Like, they're not Robin Hood thieves. They're just straight up thieves, and by association, like, I really don't like Zenigata, because, like, he's just a bad detective. Like, he's a bad detective. He's a bad cop. I don't like Zenigata at all, and I just don't like the main characters because they're not very likable. So I was really looking forward to having a season of like Sherlock Holmes where he's not going to be a continuous character. So it's just going to be Sherlock Holmes. I wanted to root for him, basically. I wanted to root for Sherlock Holmes, and I kind of did. So the season starts off, and you kind of have Lupin is in England, and then he has a history with this Sherlock Holmes, apparently. And this Sherlock Holmes, similar to Lupin, is the descendant of the original real Sherlock Holmes that existed in this universe, just like Lupin is the descendant of the Lupin that existed in this universe. And so I thought that that was what the entire season was going to be about. And that was only what the season was about for the first 2 episodes. And now I am 5 episodes. Okay, sorry. I totally forgot to mention. But so so that's what it's about for the first 2 episodes of the show. And then the next 2 episodes of the show, Sherlock is nowhere to be found and is entirely episodic and like totally disconnected. And so I'm very disappointed. I thought the entire season was going to be revolved around the mystery of Sherlock and Lupin in some way, but no, they just totally abandoned that. And I guess what's going to happen is that Sherlock will come back at the end of the season, like, or the end of the end of this core, I guess. So I think that the Sherlock storyline is going to come back into play into like a couple more episodes, like maybe around episode 9 or 10 is like when Sherlock will come back. So that is very disappointing. And then what's even crazier is they just announced that this Lupin Part 6 is going to be a half-year show, and they announced that the theme for the second half is going to be like witches or something. Like it's going to be this entirely different storyline. And so I can't even trust that anymore, because it's like I thought this entire season was going to be Sherlock, but apparently Sherlock is only the framing device for like the beginning of the season, and he's going to come back at the end of the first core, and then I think they're going to finish it off, and then they're going to introduce this new framing device of like these like this witch storyline, and then I don't even think that's going to be like, it's not even going to be what the focus of the second core is either. Like it's probably going to be the exact same thing where like they introduce the witch storyline in like episode 14, 15, and then they abandon it, and then they'll come back at the end like at episode 25 or 26. I don't know. Lupin has never been my thing. I really thought that this season was going to be the season that would get me into Lupin, but they betrayed my expectations. And also, so I mentioned it earlier, one of the problems with shows this season is that first episodes where they need to be cut, like they don't need to be there, like why is this here? So the ones I mentioned earlier were Takt Opus, where like the first episode of Takt Opus is like, it's kind of fillery. Like this, it's much better to start at episode 2 of Takt Opus, is a much better opener. And then same problem with Muv-Luv. The first episode of Muv-Luv was like totally, it like, you don't need it. Like it's just filler as well. Like starting at the second episode of Muv-Luv is much better. And then in the case of Lupin the Third Part 6, is almost literally that's the case here, where the first episode of Part 6 is actually called episode 0, which I did watch. So I watched episode 0 and then episode 1, 2, 3, 4. And episode 0 is not even done in the style of the rest of Part 6. It's done in like the style of, I believe, Part 5, the previous part, because like he doesn't have the green jacket, he has the blue jacket, which I believe he had beforehand. And the animation style is different, the art direction is different, and it was only done as a one-off special to send off the voice actor who voiced Jigen, because he's like the only original voice actor who's like stayed on like all this time. So like now he's gone, and there's a new Jigen starting in episode 1 of Part 6. So very strange though. It was very strange to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna watch the new season of Lupin, and then it's like this very strange one-off episode that looks very different from the rest of what is Part 6. So that was very strange. But yeah, I will probably be finishing it though, just because I started it. You know what I mean? Like if I don't finish it now, I don't think I will ever finish it. So I figured I might as well just finish it now. But yeah, I'll probably be finishing it. Alright, and next I'm going to talk about Komi Can't Communicate. And I think the only reason it ended up so far down on the list, there's like some theming organization, and now we're going to get into the Netflix shows, so the 2 Netflix shows of the season, which the first one I'm going to talk about is Komi Can't Communicate. And as I mentioned earlier, this is actually based off of a manga that runs in one of the big 3 shonen magazines in Japan, Weekly Shonen Sunday. And I watched it, and this is definitely way more my vibe than like My Senpai is Annoying. Like when I was talking about My Senpai is Annoying, how it's a little bit too slice of lifey for me. I need a little bit more gags. I need a little bit more surrealism or like extremism even in the comedy. That's the sweet spot that Komi Can't Communicate hit for me personally. So the basic premise is that the main character, or she's not really the main character. The main heroine, Komi, is a very pretty young girl who cannot communicate. So like everybody loves her. She's kind of like the idol of her classroom, even though nobody has ever really talked with her, because she literally cannot communicate. Like she's basically mute. Like she has basically a social anxiety disorder where she does not speak. And our main character is actually the guy in the background, Tadano. And so he's basically the first person who gets her to open up to him by doing stuff like writing on the blackboard so they communicate that way, or writing on notes and like showing them to each other. And so she kind of becomes closer to him. And then her goal for the series is she tells him that her dream is basically to make 100 friends. And so that's kind of the premise of the series, is that he wants to help her make 100 friends. And so that's basically it. It's basically a comedy series, and all the comedy is kind of derived from what you find out is that not only is the main character like this ridiculous, I shouldn't say ridiculous, but she has such an extreme personality quirk that they also reveal at the end of the first episode that pretty much everybody in the school is not ridiculous, is extreme to a certain extreme. So we meet a character who's like extremely in love, like she's an extreme romanticist basically. We meet another character who's like the super like childhood friend character. We meet another character who's like kind of masochistic, another character who's like kind of chunibyo. So it's like a lot of the characters are very extreme in one regard, and a lot of the comedy is kind of these extreme situations that they're put in, and it just hits my funny bone. I'm also very impressed. So because the main character does have this basically speech disorder, I'm very impressed that with how much writing is done in the show, that they do not dub over it. Like, I'd say a lesser show would 100% have the voice actress read over every single line that she writes out. But they never do that in the show. Like, whenever in the show, she writes something on the chalkboard for the main character to read, or if she writes something in her notebook for the main character to read, like from across the classroom, they never have her do a voiceover for it. So that is very impressive. To me, that's like the type of thing that would bug me when I was younger too. Like in a show, when they have a body swap episode and characters body swap character voices, I hate that. Like, if you body swap a character, you would not body swap their voice. You know what I mean? So I would always hate it. Like, if characters swap bodies and then they also swap voices, it doesn't make sense. Like, the voice should stick to the body that it was originally belonging to. And so I feel like that's the type of thing that would irk me. And then stuff like this too, where they would voice over everything that didn't need to be voice overed. They don't do that in the show. They don't talk down to their audience. They're like, yeah, they make them read the board, or like the subtitles. Oh, sorry, I didn't mention how far along I am episode-wise. I am on episode 5 on Japanese Netflix, and I believe this is actually one of the shows, which is good. This season, the Netflix shows are being streamed weekly, even though I believe there is a delay. I did hear that there was some controversy with the subtitling on the Netflix thing, and I think I did check it out, but I don't remember. But I believe there was some controversy where they weren't translating everything on the whiteboards all the time. But since I was watching the raw version beforehand, it wasn't that noticeable to me, because it's like, of course you're not going to read everything, but like the stuff they want you to read, they give you enough time to read in the Japanese version. So yeah, I'm liking the show. I guess the only thing I would say bad about it is I do not like... Okay, the character designs have grown on me. I really don't like what the main heroine has, though, sometimes, which I call South Park face. So sometimes she'll get this face, so she has this very generic face whenever she's drawn more realistically, but then at other times, they give her this kind of deformed face, like this chibi face, I guess you could say, but I call it South Park face, because all of a sudden her eyes are super round, and they're super big, and the reason why I don't like it is that the way they draw her eyes conveys a completely different expression than her normal resting B face, if you want to call it that. Like, so normally she has resting B face, and then all of a sudden when they draw her with the South Park face, she has a completely different expression that they never draw. Like, they never draw it in realistic proportions, and so I can't imagine what that is. Like, to me, it's a dissonance where it's like, I think what they're saying is that when she does the South Park face, that's how she feels, even though her face still looks like resting B face. But I don't like it. I don't like that they do that. Like, I would rather them just keep her face the same the entire time, because or if they could just draw the South Park face in realistic proportions so I know what it actually looks like, because I just can't imagine her face looking like that in its non-deformed proportions. So yeah, I don't like that. That's like the one complaint I have, is like that very small aesthetic complaint. And the other Netflix show of the season is Blue Period. And so Blue Period, I will also be finishing. I'm currently 6 episodes into Blue Period, and I am interested in the show. It is also very, very bingeable. It's a very bingeable show. Like, I think I had watched the first 3 episodes like back to back originally, and it was they went down very easy. I will say though that I kind of don't like the show, even though I'm going to finish it. It is an interesting show. I'm going to finish it, but I kind of don't like the show, and I think the main thing is the main character. Like, the main character is kind of unlikable to me. And I don't know if it's the show. I don't know if it's the main character's fault or the show's fault. And I think it's the fact that he is the main character that I find unlikable about him, because they put so much focus on him. Like, look at this, the poster that I put up. There's like this splash spread of like all these characters in this show, but the main character it's so inwardly focused on him, and I'm not really into how much development he has for how much internal monologue he has, basically. And I guess to give the premise of the show. The main character, he's getting to the end of his high school career, and so he's thinking about college, and he's the type of student who he works really hard to get good grades, but he doesn't really have a passion in anything. And so I believe it's his junior year, he discovers that he really does have a passion for art. But because it's so late in the game, and that he's so close to, graduating and having to choose a career for himself and like a college for himself and everything, and that he always decided to like go to like a public school with like his good grades and everything, that if he wanted to switch to art at this point in his life, he'd have to basically dedicate himself entirely to it, because there's only one like cheap school in Tokyo to go to for art if you were trying to get into a public school. Like otherwise you'd have to go to a private college where it would be much more expensive, and his family can't afford that. So a lot of the tension, I guess, of the series, like the overall goal of the series, you know what I mean? Like the overall plot of the series is that he wants to get into this one college. He wants to get into the only public art school in Tokyo so that he can actually go there and afford it. So that's kind of the plot of the show. So I like the first episode a lot. But then I very quickly realized what my problem with the show was going to be, which is that, okay, first off, just to rag on him a little bit, I kind of didn't get in the first episode where he discovers his passion for art when he's like a junior in high school. Because I'm just like, because the way he discovers his passion for art, like, it doesn't make sense they almost make it seem like he didn't have any interest in art beforehand. And I'm like, how did you not, you're exposed to art, you know what I mean? Like, in Western school, where I was, Japanese schools, I know about Japanese schools, and it's like, you are exposed to art. You have to do art for your entire, like, you're always doing art. Like, everybody has the elective art class, like, everybody does that, like, in almost every country in the world, and it's like, you are exposed to art your entire life, and then all of a sudden, your junior year, you're interested in art? Like, it just didn't really make sense to me. Like, I don't get why all of a sudden he's so interested in art. If you had to say, was there a catalyst or something? I'm like, I guess the catalyst is that he sees a piece of art that he really likes from like an upperclassman, but it's like, that still doesn't make sense. Like, I'm just like, but you knew about art beforehand, and then after that fact, it's like, it's not that you're chasing that upperclassman's art, you're still just like, oh, I like art. Like, I realized I like art, but it's very strange. I don't understand how he didn't come to that realization much sooner. So that's like one of the problems I had in the beginning. Okay, but overall, why I'm having a problem with the show overall, though, is that it's basically set up, the plot is set up like almost a battle series or a sports series, which makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, you can have art competitions. Literally, him getting into school is a competition, because they only let in a handful of students every year. Like, only a couple students will get in. So in that aspect, it is kind of a competition show. But then the problem is art as a competition, art as a sport, is very problematic to me, and I don't like it, and I don't really think it works for that type of series. And so the problem is something with sports. With sports, when you're like, why did that team win? You know why that team won, because they got more points. You know what I mean? It's very easy to write a story where it's very easy to communicate in a story that one team won because they got more points. It is much harder in a series about art to establish that this character won this competition, or this character got into this school because his art was better. Like, you can't convey that. Like, you can't convey him having better art compared to all the other people by just saying it. Like, it doesn't feel earned. And so that's my main problem, is that after this point, I'm like, I'm not invested in any of his growth, because it's all going to come down to is the author tells me that he got better at art, but I don't know if that's believable. Especially from the aspect of when you consider that this is based off a manga, and the mangaka is making all of this art, you know what I mean? So when this artist makes art for their character who is doing art, and they tell me that art looks good, like, then that manga artist is basically saying that they're that good. You know what I mean? Like, it's the problem with like writing a genius, where it's like, to write a genius, you kind of have to like be a little immodest and say, I was kind of a genius when I wrote that. So like, whenever the artist is saying that the main character is making good art, or that they're making bad art, then the comic artist the mangaka has to have confidence in saying that what they drew was good art, or what they draw was objectively bad art, which is like, that's also a whole nother can of worms. And so yeah, it's kind of hard for me to like kind of get behind that kind of story, as well as, because that would also have to deal with talent, where it's like, they're kind of starting to get into that, which is also a pet peeve of mine, where it's like, if your story is about people who have talent and people who don't have talent, it's like, that's not an interesting story, because it's like, either they have it or they don't, and then if your story is about them working hard to overcome people who have talent, then what you end up saying by accident, like, I don't think stories intend to say this, but what stories end up saying by accident at that point is saying that this character won because they tried harder and they worked harder when all the other characters didn't. And that's not what they're trying to say, you know what I mean? Like, they're trying to say that this character won over the talented people because he tried harder, but accidentally it says that all the other characters in the work didn't try hard, and that's why they failed, and that's why they're losers, blah, blah, blah. So it's a slippery slope. I will be finishing the show. I hope I end up liking it, but as of right now, I'm engrossed. I'm engrossed in it, but I'm also grossed out by it. See what I did there? So yeah, I will be finishing it though. Alright, and now on to the last show of the season that I will be covering is Ranking of Kings. And so this is probably, I mean, I guess it is. Like, if I have to choose, it is my favorite show of the season. So the basic premise is that there is this young prince named Boji, and he ends up befriending a kind of seemingly malicious little entity called Kage, which of course Kage means shadow in Japanese, and this Kage comes from the Shadow Tribe, who is apparently a group of assassins. It's a clan of assassins that used to work for some country out there, and they apparently betrayed the king and they got wiped out. So apparently this Kage guy is like the last Shadow Clan guy, and so he ends up befriending this young prince called Boji, who happens to be deaf. And in the show, they continually reference him as deaf and dumb. It is a little bit confusing though, because like, so when you say deaf and dumb in English, what the dumb portion usually means is dumb means you cannot speak. And so this character cannot speak. Like, it basically means mute. And so he is deaf and dumb in the sense of he's deaf mute. Like, he cannot hear and he cannot speak. But it does get confusing because in Japanese they are saying that. They're saying that he can't speak, but then they do also say he's dumb a lot. Like, and they're saying dumb as in baka. Like, they're saying dumb as an idiot. So he is. So to recap, I guess, the background of the prince character is they do say he is deaf. They do say he cannot speak, he's mute. And they also do say that he is an idiot in some senses. But they never use explicit terminology to say that he is, like, if he is mentally challenged at all. Like, if he has any kind of mental disability. They never confirm that. And so I like the show a lot. That is one of those things, though, I wish they were a little bit more specific about. Because I honestly don't know how I feel about him as a portrayal of either a deaf person or a person with disabilities, like mental disabilities at this point, because I don't really know where he falls on that line. Other than that, the show is very nice. So it is basically this prince befriends this shadow dude. And I guess the main thing I would like to gush about is actually the production values of the show. So this is based off of manga, and the manga it's not that impressive. Like, it is a stylized manga, but it is kind of a little bit more amateurish. Like, it is kind of what you think when you see this art style. It is kind of what you assume. I guess you want to say the quality of the art would be, because this is an anime studio. Of course, there's a much more solid baseline of the amount of artistry that goes into it. So the show looks really good. Like, the show looks really good. And I really love designs, and I really love the line work as well. So the line work is done in a very kind of, it's a little bit blotchy, I guess, in a way, and it kind of looks like a traditionally cell animated anime. It reminds me of like old classic shows like Future Boy Conan, which I watched Future Boy Conan for like the first time like 2 years ago, I think. And a lot of anime isn't that good, and a lot of kids anime is also very not good. And I knew that Future Boy Conan was like Miyazaki's first kind of, I mean, it was like his first and only TV series, basically, that he did like from start to finish. And it blew me away. It really did blow me away. And this show reminds me of watching that so much. And it really makes me wish that this show kind of was treated like Future Boy Conan was at the time, where it was a show that was targeted at kind of the younger demographic that you could talk about and watch with your family. That's not the case here, though. So the Ranking of Kings is it runs, like I wish it was running on like a family channel and it was meant for families, but it is running on Noitamina block, which I love the Noitamina block. It is on Fuji Television. They have like a ton of shows. Like kind of their whole thing is that they make anime that like isn't the most professionally viable, I guess. It's not the most commercially viable anime they put on Noitamina block. I really like the block a lot. But it is a late night block. So I believe it's like literally at like midnight on Thursdays is when this airs. So that is kind of disappointing. But that's not the only thing to praise about the show. So I love how it looks. I love the simplicity of the look, but also like the fluidity of the motion. Like a lot of the animation and like the character acting is very good. And I like the art direction for the designs and for the line work. I like it a lot. But that's not the only good thing about the show. It definitely is the highlight to the season to me, also because of the story. Like, pretty much every week, the story does genuinely engage me on, like, an emotional level on some point, which is very impressive. Because I feel like no other anime this season is really doing that. Like, I think one of my main complaints about mostly anime is that they're kind of unremarkable in most ways. Like, they're just a show. Like, they're just a show, and hopefully they hit the finales, like, out of the park. But this one, Ranking of the King started so good though. It's like even if they tank after this, I feel like I'll still enjoy watching the openings because like the opening episodes have been pretty good so far. But yeah, I don't know how much I want to talk about the show besides that because I definitely do recommend you check it out. It could bomb and crash, but the start is really good. Most of the episodes have genuinely emotionally engaged me. I'll definitely finish it. I guess if I want to say some bad things about the show, I will say that some of the plotting has not been the most logical so far. There has been some like inconsistencies with character, just like with the way characters are doing things, where I don't know if character actions make the most sense. And specifically what I'm thinking about is there's a cliffhanger at the end of the first episode, which is very good. The ending of the first episode is very good. And then they come back to this cliffhanger in the second episode, and they resolve it in a way that makes no sense. Like, it doesn't really make any sense at all. And I'm like, why'd you have to do that? Like, why'd you have to ruin the cliffhanger from the first episode and then treat it like this when how you're treating it doesn't really make any sense? But I still was able to get past it because I know what they're going for. Like, I know what the show was going for with most of the directions they do. I just don't know why they chose to go that way. But it's way more good than bad. You know what I mean? There is definitely way more good in it than bad. But I guess there is some red flags of like what could accumulate over time into being a mess of a show. So far though, it is good. I'm trying really hard not to like spoil stuff and to just, say that I did like it, but I guess I don't have utter confidence in it, but I do like it. And that's it. Alright, so that's it for this season. I'm Intermediate O. I can't believe I watched all these shows. I can't believe I watched so many episodes, and I can't believe I'm going to continue watching the majority of them. Like, I'm going to continue watching so much stuff this season. Like, it is insane. Tell me what you thought of these shows or my impressions down in the comments. If there's any show that you're following and that I'm also following and that you would really want me to do like a review on, please tell me that as well. Because like I'm not really getting into that space yet. But since I'm watching so many shows this season and I had to do this entire video about them, like, these are basically all a bunch of mini reviews anyways, maybe I will come back like at the end of the season for the shows I did watch and give a little bit of, overall reviews on them. So yeah, I really enjoyed doing this. It did take a long time though to like, talk through all this, but I'm happy you stuck around, or even if you just clicked around the different parts. Thank you, and see you guys next time.